If you're listening to this, there's a strong chance you've always known something about yourself that you were never able to explain. Not because someone told you, not because a book confirmed it, but because your entire life has felt misaligned with the world you were born into. You don't move through reality the way others do. You don't react the way you're supposed to. You feel before you think. You sense before you see. And somewhere deep inside, you've carried a quiet question you rarely allow yourself to ask: why do I feel so different? And why has it always cost me something? This isn't about being special. It's about being rare in a way that is often punished before it is understood. Because rare personalities are not celebrated early in life. They are misunderstood. They are drained. They are shaped by pressure, trauma, and contradiction. And if you are one of them, you didn't awaken gently. You were carved. If you're still listening, it means this story is already brushing against something personal. There are 6 signs that reveal an extremely rare personality structure, not as a label, but as a psychological and spiritual configuration. And the first sign is the one that nearly breaks you before you recognize it. Sign 1: you were born with a depth that made others uncomfortable from a very early age. You sensed what others tried to hide. Not just emotions, patterns. You noticed shifts in tone before arguments started. You felt tension in rooms where everyone else smiled. You knew when someone was lying not because of words, but because their energy fractured. Adults often told you that you were too serious, too sensitive, or too intense. But what they were really saying was this: your awareness disrupts our denial. You asked questions that had no simple answers. You noticed hypocrisy long before you had language for it. And instead of being guided, you were corrected. So you learned to dim yourself. This is where the first fracture forms in rare personalities. Not because they are weak, but because their inner world develops faster than their environment can support. You didn't lose your depth. You buried it. If you're still listening, it means you recognize the loneliness of seeing too much, too early. And here's the truth most people never hear: depth without containment becomes pain. Depth without mirrors becomes self-doubt. This is why rare personalities often grow up feeling alien in their own families. You weren't raised, you were managed. And that leads directly to the second sign. Sign 2: you attracted narcissistic or dominating personalities. Without seeking them, you didn't chase power. Power found you. Teachers who controlled rather than guided. Parents who demanded emotional labor. Partners who were drawn to your empathy like moths to a flame they could feed on. You didn't understand it at first. You thought love meant endurance. You believed that if someone needed you, that was proof of your value. This is not accidental. Rare personalities often carry an unconscious signal: I can hold what you refuse to face. And narcissistic structures are drawn to that signal. They sense your capacity before you do. So they attach, they idealize, they consume, and slowly, you are trained to abandon yourself in the name of harmony. If you're still listening, it means you've felt the exhaustion of giving more than you receive and blaming yourself for needing rest. But here is the psychological truth hidden beneath the pain: you weren't weak. You were unprotected. Your empathy had no boundary yet. Your shadow had not been integrated. And without shadow, light becomes exploitable. This is not failure. It is an early stage of transformation. But before transformation comes collapse. And that is the third sign. Sign 3: you experience life as a series of inner deaths and rebirths, while others move linearly. You move cyclically. You shed identities. You outgrow friendships. You feel called to destroy versions of yourself that once kept you safe. And every time, it feels like loss. Not dramatic loss, existential loss. You've had moments where everything familiar dissolved, and you stood alone with yourself, unsure who you were becoming. This is rare. Most people avoid inner death at all costs. You cannot. Something inside you demands authenticity, even when it hurts. So life pushes you into dark nights of the soul, not to punish you, but to strip illusions. If you're still listening, it means you know the terror of standing between who you were and who you cannot yet name. This is where many turn back. Rare personalities do not. But this path comes with a price: isolation. Sign 4: you feel most alive in solitude. But deeply long for true connection, you don't crave crowds. You crave resonance. Small talk drains you. Superficial bonds exhaust you. But one authentic connection can sustain you for years. This contradiction confuses others. They see you withdraw and assume coldness. They don't see how deeply you feel. You retreat not to escape people, but to protect your inner world from contamination. If you're still listening, it means you've been accused of being distant when you were actually overwhelmed. Here is the truth: rare personalities are not antisocial. They are selectively intimate. Your nervous system is tuned to depth, not volume. And until you meet someone who can meet you there, solitude is safer. But solitude is also where shadows grow louder. Which brings us to the most misunderstood sign of all. Sign 5: you are haunted by an inner darkness you don't fully trust, yet you have thoughts you don't say out loud. Anger you don't express. Power you don't claim. Not because you are dangerous, but because you were taught that your intensity was a threat. So you split. Light self, shadow self, caretaker versus truth speaker, empath versus destroyer. But the shadow does not disappear. It waits, and when ignored, it leaks through exhaustion, resentment, sudden withdrawals, or emotional collapse. If you're still listening, it means you've felt guilt for emotions you never learned how to integrate. This is the turning point. Because rare personalities are not meant to destroy their shadow. They are meant to embody it consciously. But that realization changes everything. And not everyone survives it. Soft cliffhanger: the threshold. There is a moment in the life of a rare personality when empathy stops being enough. When endurance turns into self-betrayal. When silence becomes violence against the self. That moment feels like a breaking point. But it is not. It is an initiation. Because the sixth sign does not emerge until you stop feeding what consumes you. And when that happens, your entire psychological gravity shifts. In part 2, we enter the most dangerous phase of the rare personality's journey, the moment you stop abandoning yourself and others begin to feel it. There is a moment, quiet, unannounced, when something ancient inside you changes direction. It doesn't arrive as confidence. It doesn't feel like victory. It feels like exhaustion that has reached its limit. Not the kind of tired that sleep can fix, but the kind that comes from carrying what was never yours to hold. If you're still listening, it means you've reached this place at least once. The place where empathy turns inward, where silence stops being noble, where survival instincts awaken from their long dormancy. This is where the sixth sign begins to reveal itself, not as a trait, but as a threshold. Sign 6: when you stop feeding others from your soul. Everything around you shifts for most of your life. Your presence stabilized chaos. You absorbed tension before it exploded. You softened others' emotions before they became dangerous. You made rooms calmer simply by entering them. This wasn't accidental. Your nervous system learned early how to regulate others as a way to stay safe. But something changes when you stop. Not abruptly, not cruelly, simply, firmly. You stop explaining yourself. You stop overgiving. You stop translating your boundaries into apologies. And what happens next is unsettling. People don't thank you for your growth. They react to your withdrawal as if it were betrayal. If you're still listening, it means you've seen confusion turn into hostility the moment you chose yourself. This is not coincidence. When you stop feeding the emotional ecosystem, the ecosystem reveals its dependency. And this is the moment narcissistic structures begin to collapse around you. The narcissist's response to your awakening, they sense it before you speak. On shift, a closing door, an energy no longer available for extraction. They test you. Subtle guilt, emotional bait, sudden vulnerability. And when that fails, the mask slips, criticism sharpens, control intensifies, reality is distorted. This is not because you became cruel. It is because you became unavailable. If you're still listening, it means you've watched someone unravel when you stopped playing your role. This is one of the most dangerous phases of the rare personality's journey, not because you are weak, but because you are changing gravity. You are no longer orbiting others. Others must now confront themselves, and many cannot. The internal war, empathy versus self-loyalty, this phase is not empowering at first. It feels like grief. You question yourself. You replay conversations. You wonder if you've become heartless. This is the old conditioning speaking. You were trained to equate worth with usefulness, love with sacrifice, safety with self-erasure. So when you choose differently, guilt rises like a shadow trying to reclaim its territory. If you're still listening, it means you've mistaken guilt for intuition before. Here is the truth: most never realize guilt is often the echo of a role you were never meant to keep playing. This is where rare personalities face their most critical decision. Do you return to who you were to keep the peace? Or do you endure the discomfort of becoming who you actually are? Most turn back here. You did not. The shadow stirs not to destroy, but to protect. When you stop abandoning yourself, your shadow changes its posture. It no longer leaks through resentment. It no longer erupts unexpectedly. It stands beside you, quiet, watchful, protective. This is not darkness overtaking you. This is integration. Your anger becomes clarity. Your boundaries become firm without cruelty. Your presence becomes heavier, not aggressive, but undeniable. If you're still listening, it means you've felt this weight return to your body. This is why people respond differently to you now. They feel something they can't name. Authority without domination. Depth without chaos. Empathy with limits. This combination is rare, and it is unsettling to those who rely on unconscious power dynamics. The loss and why it is necessary as you integrate. You lose people, not because you reject them, but because the version of you they knew no longer exists. You no longer overfunction. You no longer rescue. You no longer absorb blame to keep harmony intact. And so the bonds that were built on imbalance dissolve. This hurts more than most people admit. Rare personalities don't detach easily. They outgrow. And growth can feel like grief when you have depth. If you're still listening, it means you've mourned people who are still alive. This is not coldness. This is clarity. The awakening: when solitude becomes power, there comes a phase where you stand alone, not abandoned, but unentangled. The noise quiets. The compulsions fade. Your inner world stabilizes. You no longer feel the urge to explain your evolution. You simply live it. This is where intuition sharpens into perception. You see patterns instantly. You read subtext effortlessly. You sense misalignment without needing evidence. But now, instead of freezing or fawning, you act, not dramatically, decisively. If you're still listening, it means you've tasted this stillness and it scared you a little. Because with it comes responsibility. When you can no longer pretend not to know. The rare personality's true test power is not loud. It does not announce itself. It does not seek validation. It waits to see if you will betray yourself again. This is the final trap. The world will invite you back into old roles with new promises. You've changed. You're different now. I need you. And the choice will return. not once but repeatedly. If you're still listening, it means you're learning that awakening is not a moment. It is a discipline. And discipline requires something rare: the ability to remain open without being porous, to love without dissolving, to see darkness without becoming it. This is where the rare personality stops reacting and starts choosing. Soft cliffhanger, the final transformation. There is one final stage most never reach. It is not visible on the surface. It is not dramatic. It does not seek recognition. It is the moment you realize you were never meant to save anyone. You were meant to embody something others remember when they are ready. In part 3, we enter the final integration, the archetype you step into once you stop needing to be understood, and why those who reach this stage quietly reshape the psychological phi. There is a silence that comes after transformation. Not emptiness, not loneliness, but a stillness so deep it feels unfamiliar at first. This is where you arrive when you no longer chase meaning, because meaning has begun to move through you. If you're still listening, it means something inside you has already crossed this threshold, even if your life has not fully caught up yet. This final stage does not announce itself. It does not feel like awakening the way people imagine it. It feels like coming home to a self you were never allowed to be. The final integration, when you stop seeking permission to exist at some point. You realize something quietly devastating. You spent years asking for permission to be whole, permission to rest, permission to say no, permission to feel anger without shame, permission to take up space without apologizing for it. And then one day, you stop asking, not because you become rebellious, but because the question itself dissolves. You no longer negotiate your existence. If you're still listening, it means you've felt this shift when self-respect replaces self-justification. This is the rare personality's final psychological realignment. You no longer live from reaction. You live from alignment. The archetype you embody without trying, you do not become louder. You become clearer. Your words carry weight because they are no longer defensive. Your silence speaks because it is no longer fearful. People sense it immediately. They feel calmer exposed in your presence. This is the paradox of the integrated rare personality. You no longer seek to heal others. Yet healing occurs around you. You no longer absorb chaos. Yet chaos reveals itself more quickly. You no longer rescue. Yet those ready to change find clarity through you. If you're still listening, it means you've noticed how people now project less onto your project more intensely before retreating. Both are signs of power, but not the kind the ego craves, the kind the psyche respects. Why you were never meant to belong to the crowd. You were never designed for mass identification. Your nervous system is too refined, your perception too precise, your inner world too layered. Crowds operate on consensus. Rare personalities operate on truth. This is why you often felt out of step with trends, norms, and collective emotional swings. You weren't resisting the world. You were out of phase with it. If you're still listening, it means you've felt that ache, that longing to belong without betraying yourself. The resolution is subtle. You stop trying to belong, and in doing so, you become a reference point for others who are quietly awakening. The final shadow, power without attachment at this stage. Your shadow no longer demands attention. It has been acknowledged, integrated, embodied. You no longer fear your intensity. You no longer suppress your truth. You no longer dilute your presence to remain acceptable. But here is the final test few talk about. Can you hold power without needing to use it? Can you see manipulation without exposing it? Can you feel others' wounds without stepping into them? Can you walk away without proving anything? If you're still listening, it means you are learning restraint not from fear, but from wisdom. This is the maturity of the rare personality. The role you play without a title. You are not a savior, not a martyr, not a guide in the traditional sense. You are something quieter, a stabilizer, a mirror. A threshold. People encounter you at turning points in their lives. Some resent you. Some are grateful. Some don't understand why they remember you years later. You don't control this. You simply live aligned. If you're still listening, it means you've sensed that your presence has consequences without you intending it. This is not ego. It is responsibility. The myth you are living, every culture tells this story differently. The one who descends early. The one who sees too much. The one who carries shadow without becoming it. The one who returns not to rule, but to stand. You were never meant to escape the world. You were meant to walk within it awake. An awakening does not mean perfection. It means coherence. Your thoughts align with your values. Your actions align with your boundaries. Your empathy aligns with self-respect. This is the rarest configuration of all. The quiet ending and the real beginning. There is no applause for this stage. No external validation. No dramatic transformation montage. Just a steady inner flame. You wake up knowing who you are. You go to sleep without self-betrayal. You choose relationships that meet you, not consume you. And when loneliness appears, it no longer feels like rejection. It feels like space. If you're still listening, it means you've realized something essential. You were never broken. You were early. Early to depth. Early to awareness. Early to integration. And those who are early often walk alone until others catch up. If this reached you, it's because something in you recognized itself. Not as a label. Not as superiority. But as remembrance. You don't need to share this. You don't need to explain it. You don't need to prove anything. Just live it. That is enough.